Thank you so much for everybody for joining us this morning. So we're going to move on to the panel topics, which is the importance of diversity on boards and the need for innovation on boards. So I'd just like, first of all, to ask the panellists to just briefly introduce yourself, your background, and in particular the NED and chair experience that you that bring with you today. So Joe, will we start with you?
My name's Joe. I'm the chairman of Baker Northwestern Group. It's quite an interesting organisation. We're actually a cooperative of 500 shareholders, well, 455. So it's quite an interesting organisation to lead. I also sit on the board of the Small Business Charter, which is part of the Association of Business Schools. Our remit through Lord Young is to assess business schools on their engagement with the SME community right across the UK and now actually outside of the UK. And I'm a former board member of a very exciting organisation, British Sandwich Association, which sounds kind of really great if you're hungry for lunch, but actually is a really fascinating place to be, all of which are extremely diverse in their own way.
Thank you. Mike.
Hi, good morning. I am CEO and founder of MC2, which is a strategic marketing agency. In terms of non-exec positions, I sit on the board of MMU, the greatest university in the UK, widest participation university. I chair a great organisation called Greater Sport, which has got the remit to make the whole of Greater Manchester active. So we're trying to do that with kind of £16 million worth of various funding. Sit on the board of the Rugby League World Cup 2021. So we're putting on a global event in the UK in 2021, and I'd like all of you to attend that if that's okay. Sit on the board of Maggie's Cancer Care charity. And then I've got some investments that I sit on the board of Prime Recruitment. I've got a TV production business and digital marketing agency, and sit as a NED on an incredible financial recruitment business called Tyndall Perry.
Anything else?
Long list. Good morning, everyone. My name's Sarah McKenna. I am Australian. I have been here 3 years and learned to love the weather, especially this summer. Rugby, that's new to me, and what we call soccer, we call football. So I've had a rapid education over the last 3 years on a whole load of new and wonderful things. I find myself here by good luck rather than good design. My husband's northern, and we're raising our 3 kids here. I took my immigration here as a crossroads, really, to get out of corporate life and start to do something a little different. And most recently, that's been building a career serving on boards, small, medium and large boards, and any given time I hold 4 or 5 posts. But my passion project at the moment is MSB Leaders, of which I'm chair. It's a research entity, a social enterprise, if you like, and its partners include public and private, and particularly Salford Business School. Over the last 2 years, we've conducted the largest study of mid-sized business directors ever undertaken in the country, and the data I'd like to share with you today and perhaps in future events, and how that relates to being a good and effective NED. I like to think that my NED credentials are drawn on from my ability to lead businesses. And prior to coming here, I spent the last 13 years in Asia Pacific building out the corporate footprint for the CMG group of companies, which is a conglomerate of marketing, brand and advertising businesses. Prior to that, I served for 12 years in government. I'm not as old as I look either. Where I was a ministerial advisor and left as the first female chief of staff ever to hold the post in Victorian and federal governments. So today I'm hoping to contribute perhaps more as practically as I can, because I've sat in your shoes, and I'd like to share some things you could go and do tomorrow to help on your journey around either becoming a NED or being a better one. Thank you.
I think you know about me.
I think, you learn by surrounding yourself by amazing people, and I think that's what hopefully done today for my own journey. So Joe, let's start with you. There was a Credit Suisse report that went out to say that female executives on boards actually resulted in a better share price. Now, you've recently completed an MBA in which you spent some time actually looking at board structure. What were some of the key findings of that? What makes for an effective board, in your view?
I think last year I graduated as an old man, which is quite interesting having your kids at your graduation. And that really opened my eyes to the whole idea of diversity, because I think I went into that whole module thinking very much along the lines that most people think when the word diversity is mentioned. So it's ethnicity, gender, possibly faith. These are what's described in the academic literature as surface diversity. And not really thinking about this other thing, which comes out in the literature, which is deep diversity. So it is perfectly possible to have 5 guys called Dave who are extremely diverse, although you wouldn't know that if you just looked at the surface. And I found it quite powerful stuff, actually, because it kind of instilled in me that it is also perfectly possible to what appears to be a surface-driven diverse board, but actually they're all in the same mindset, or at least have the same sort of outlook. And yesterday, I was fortunate enough, my daughter took me out for dinner. Well, she picked the restaurant and I paid for it. She's a student, she's 21. She doesn't mind me saying this because I asked for permission. She's gay. She leads the LGBT society at her university, and she's studying to be a doctor. She's in her 4th year. I started talking about diversity. Can you help me? Because you're young, and you tick at least 2 or 3 boxes here that lots of people would think about when they were thinking about diversity. And she said, yeah. We had this really great discussion. She said, will you talk about where people are educated? Why is that? Because I'm at medical school, and I can count on the fingers of one hand in my friendship group, which is pretty big. They have really big friendship groups. Young female students have huge friendship groups. Somebody who went to a state primary school, and a state secondary school, and a state sixth form. Most of them went to private school. Most of them went to a private sixth form. And most of them are at a Russell Group or beyond university. And what she said was, and there are all international students, all genders, actually mainly female at the moment. The cohorts are much driven by female cohorts. They're all different faiths, and they're all different ethnicities. But it's really difficult to get a different outlook from this group of students. As an example, she said, you would be quite surprised how many of my friendship group have never had a job. Ever. They don't need to. I'm not talking about experience in something medical, because you have to have that to get in, but I mean a job that pays you money, because they don't need to. So when one's thinking about diversity, I think the danger is possibly that if you recruit from people who have, I'm going to say something now that's going to upset my audit chair.
We love controversy.
She's in the audience. Someone from a Big 4 accountancy practice, or from, who graduated from a top 5 economics university. Are you getting diversity irrespective of their gender, their ethnicity, or are you getting a corporate instructed person who has a particular way of thinking, because actually that's how they've gone through, I hate to say this, the factory. So I think there's no doubt that diversity is really powerful and leads to increased performance. But I think you've got to look beyond the surface. I think it goes back to Sally said about tokenism. Choosing someone for tokenism, or actually, I got an application for a NED position recently, and I looked at the person specification, and I was just horrified. It was for an NHS trust. And I thought, well, you haven't got a chance, because all the things you're asking for, they're just going to be recruiting the same people. And almost certainly, they're going to be recruiting someone who's come to the end of their tenure on another NHS board. They're 3 years in, they have to get off because they've got a tenure restriction. And they go on and say, oh, I've got experience of this. So I think all of the academic literature says that it's great. that diversity is brilliant, but it does warn you that you shouldn't change just for change's sake, because a high-performing team doesn't need to be changed. You should do it at the right time, and you should do it with the right motivation, and most importantly, actually find somebody who is diverse. I think what we're looking for is innovation. I would like to use the word sort of agitation as opposed to innovation. Something like that grit that creates the pearl, the thing that agitates the board to improve its performance, to look at things differently. So I've probably gone on too long, but...
No, I just wanted to see, did anybody in the panel want to add to that?
Just on that point, because I think that's a great theme to kind of pick up. So at Great Sport, we've just been through a board recruitment exercise, and we were very keen that we need different voices in this, around this this board table. We need to avoid that confirmation bias, of everybody kind of going through the same thought process. And so you wouldn't believe the efforts that we put in terms of the thinking around the recruitment, how we were going to do it, and all the rest. But then when it kind of went into the secretarial, the company's secretarial function, it was, here's where we advertise it, this is how we do it, this is the da-da-da. And it was going through that process, and it was only Paula Dunn, who is she's Paralympic coach, who grew up in Moss Side, who came through, and she went, you're not going to reach anybody who is diverse with that language, with that, through those channels, with this, that, da, da, da. And there was a whole pause where people went, sorry, can we actually just do all this with you and kind of help work it out and da, da, da. And so the recruitment process, then all of a sudden we have got proper diversity onto that board that I can sit there. Rob Mukherjee sits on the board, and I think you'll probably confirm, that it is different mindsets that are coming in, and you say things that you go as chair. So obviously we da-da-da, you can't help but, and people go, actually, no, I don't think that. And it's great to have that pause and that challenge in there.
I think it sounds like Paula does exactly what, Sally, you were describing as effective now, is ask the difficult questions.
Yeah.
It's about being comfortable, being uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I know I'm very nice, but, I want to know where, 60K is gone in a hole, or why we're buying stock of housing for one particular supplier. Are they just dumping it? So yeah, I think if everybody is silent, I think great, I've had a great day. I'm using humor, but it is about effectiveness, actually. Yeah. And if you've recruited in that way, you're having some really important and impactful discussions on some of the issues.
Just if I may, I think just to take that back a step, however, I would say it's good that you've actually got a process of recruitment in place at all. Because a lot of I think when you work in a listed environment, and I've sat on an NHS trust board for the last 3 years, and it's probably one of the best mental health trusts in the country. It's the largest, it's one of the best run, incredibly impressive. And I was on the interview panel being interviewed by, I'm not kidding you, a panel of 6 or 7, quite usual in those environments. And I was asked the question, well, you've not been here long, how are you going to come up to speed quickly? How are you going to compete with the other candidate being interviewed in the other room who is from here? And I said, I never will. That's not what you're bringing in. You're bringing in a completely different perspective. And I think the challenge for chairs particularly is understanding the role, the tapestry of their board. So in the same way that you build out a management team to have different roles played by different functional leaders, you need to have that same perspective with boards. And it doesn't happen. Boards grow organically. When you're in the foxhole and you're trying to grow a company or turn it around, you turn to people within your network who you trust. Very rarely is it opened up to recruitment processes. It's only when they have to be in the case of not-for-profit or some sort of external scrutiny. And I think some of the most interesting jobs, particularly for aspiring or early NEDs, is in the private equity space and in private enterprise, where you can really cut your teeth in some very challenging scenarios. So I think the challenge is for boards, for chairs, to get their act together and work out what is the tapestry of their team and use I'm a huge subscriber to psychographic profiling so that you can understand the deep diversity of your board, the really different thinking, age, perspective, gender, faith. They're all superficial. I think you articulated it beautifully. That is shallow, superficial diversity. The deep diversity of perspective and skill set is really what we should be building in terms of a board tapestry.
Thank you. Sarah, you recently completed a doctoral thesis on the threats to mid-sized businesses. We've just touched upon that, surface diversity as being one of them, but what impact does diversity have within the talent pool at a senior leadership level?
Well, I think the pool is obviously smaller. There's a smaller pool of women at the top, whether they be operational executive positions or board positions. And we talk a lot about effectiveness and performance, but in order to perform, we have to first have the opportunity to take on the role. So I think, part of the work that I'm trying to do just through my own organic networking is give women the opportunity to take on the role, then worry about performing. And there's quite a lot of research around the fact that men, when they apply for roles, will wait until they have most of the skill. Women, when they apply for roles, will look to have most of the skills that are in the job description before having the confidence to apply. Inversely, men will say, yeah, I could do that, I'm going to give it a go, and I'll learn it on the job. Ironically, my husband and I have those opposite profiles. I've always taken a job and thought, oh, I can do that. I'll work it out once I'm in there. I've got some good mentors and people around me. I'll make a go of it, applied. He needs full confidence around the skill set in order to even feel comfortable doing that job or applying for it. So with women, I think this is a challenge for chairs and incumbent NEDs to look outside their own network. Don't just tap a mate on the shoulder. Look outside your network. Have a process of broader recruitment. And women need to start applying. You need to start applying and prepare for those roles with support from others. Any aspiring NED in the room that wants a phone call with me prior can catch me through Tricia. But it is supporting each other into those roles, coaching for interviews, and getting the jobs. And once you're in there, help other women into those roles. And I think sometimes we're not great at that. There's some generations that have thought, I've had to work really hard for this post, so you have to work twice as hard as well. Whereas I think women need to be saying, come on, I'll help you into this role. When my first director's role, I had no idea I Googled, how do you be a good director? And then I hopped on Amazon and bought 6 books and read. I had no support at all, but you can do it. And it's not rocket science. I was terrified my first board meeting. I'm like, what's going to happen? People will find me out that I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. If you're smart, if you're prepared, if you're organised, and you genuinely want to add value, and you read a few books and you have some supporters around you, it is a job that can be done. So have the confidence to go for the roles, prepare for them really well, and for those of you that are already in board roles, open the doors.
Yeah. Great.
Actually, that's really, really good. And you don't have to read all 6 books now. You can join
blogs.
NedOnBoard, where's Liv?
Yeah,
come to events like this.
Yeah, some of the organisations and attend events like this. So.
Yeah. Mike, I'm going to come to you. Your day job, the CEO.
Yeah.
Board members are a great resource. And for you as an executive, how does having a diverse board help you be more successful in your role?
I think I'm a simple man, so I'll go back to kind of simple basics, which is the purpose of an organisation. If everybody thinks, what's the purpose of an organisation, I'd kind of put it down in 2 words, which is grow value. And that is if you're growing value for the clients, for the financials, for the community, for the talent that exists within the organisation, but, it should be grow value. And then you kind of look, what are the risks to growing value? And basically, you sit behind two risks, which is reputational risk or issues or macro issues. You know, the market moves against you, sociological trends go against you, you've got the economy that goes, you know, those kind of macro pieces that happen, or reputationally, your governance isn't strong enough and something happens. So what do you need to do to get a view of those two dangers is you need the viewpoints that are looking in different directions and that are challenging, because, you know, I'm sure that the board of HMV sat there going, we're doing everything right here, you know, this is absolutely amazing, while all this was going on. And then you sit in San Francisco where their board meetings go, what's now, what's next, what's next? You know, and boards need to be able to look with those viewpoints. So I love the deep diversity theme. I sit on a board with MC2 where we have over 50% female. And you're right, traditionally people would say, that's a very diverse board. It's not, because we haven't got a lot of that diverse thinking that you need. And that is an issue for the sector that I work in. It's an issue for you know, as well as bringing people into organizations onto boards, you need to create the conditions that actually people feel welcome. But within our sector, we're an outlier in terms of how diverse we are. And we've got 170% growth in profits year on year. You know, we're an incredibly strong high growth organization. We work with high growth organizations between that kind of 200 million and $1 billion kind of side. So you need to understand what are the things that are going to threaten the organization and make sure you've got viewpoints that can see those challenges.
Yeah, about anticipating the risk. Joe, so how can boards go about that? How can they create that effective, diverse board? How can they go about doing it?
I think the first thing that they can do, and probably it is down to the chair and the deputy or whatever kind of governance structure they've got in place. But the first thing is just understand that they need to be looking at the composition of their board. And I think tenure plays a huge part. I'll have to be careful what I say here, but a board I chair currently, when I joined that board, the average tenure was more than 20 years.
Yeah.
When I walked to my first board meeting, the then chairman, I arrived early, as all good new employees do, and I sat down in the boardroom thinking this is going to be horrendous. I was nervous, and the chairman walked in and said, what are you doing sitting there? That's David's chair. And he did say David. That's David's chair, which is my chair. I said, oh, you're in that chair. No size, no. And not only had they all been there 20 years, they all had their own chair. So, and I'm not trying to denigrate those individuals, but what I'm saying is that is a great example of a board at that time that didn't feel the need, and effectively everybody sat there for an awful long time. And things were okay. But the world did change, and things didn't become okay. And we now have a board where our average tenure is probably, what do you think, Diane, less than 3 years? Yeah. So that's the radical change. And by the way, I've been on that board 5 years. So that'll give you sort of an indication of how rapidly this change has taken place. There were no females on the board out of the 6 directors. There are now 6 directors and 2 non-execs, and 2 of those are female. I was the first board member, because this is a bakery organization, that didn't bake, which was really radical. And I'm now the only one who doesn't watch Bake Off, so you know I'm like really weird. And now we have 2 non-execs who have no baking experience at all. So in a very, very short space of time, we have actually radically transformed the makeup of our board. But that is also, and again, I think it's probably important, governance of an organization really relies on its structure, and I'm talking about its legal structure. So we had plenty of barriers in front of us that stopped us doing what we wanted to do because legally our articles of association didn't allow us. So it meant we had to go to our shareholders and change them.
Yeah.
And if you have to do that, or if you feel like that's the right thing to do for your organisation, then that's a step that the chair should put in place with the rest of the board to take with their full support and say, we want to be able to do this. And certainly in our case, what we did is we created a structure, which I was really keen on, that gives us a wide enough expansion so that we can, because one of the key things is, will you run out of directorial seats if you don't have enough provision in your articles? So have enough so that you can bring people in if you need them. It sounds really simple, but in a moment of crisis when you need somebody or you want somebody, if you're then facing, oh, maybe I've got to sack somebody in order to bring somebody in. And certainly when we go back to diversity, one of the key findings about diversity is where somebody has been removed in order to bring somebody in a perception of diversity, it destroys teams.
Yeah.
So there's lots of good, sensible, practical stuff that you as chairs, or if you are not a chair, that you might want to look at the structure of your organisation, that you could advise the chair on, because I think that I'm an ex-soldier, so I always like to be prepared. I like to think, it's really going to hit the fan, and have I got enough artillery, and have I got some big tanks if I need it? I might not need them, but I want them there if I need them. So I can't help thinking strategically like that. And so I think structure is important, but then the next thing is identify people that you can work with. And we've been really fortunate. I'm going to mention her again because this lady here, Diane, who is our audit chairman, has been absolutely transformational for our board, our business. Absolutely transformational. She was the first woman to be recruited to that board position, as a non-executive. And it made a huge difference, massive. So I would say that those are the key things. Prepare yourself, make sure you've got the right structures in place. And if necessary, give the chair a hard time.
Yeah.
So tenure, articles, people, planning. Would anybody else like to add anything more to that?
I think I would say when you get once you're on the board, find out where the board has been in order to understand where it's going. Because I'm on a board where somebody's been on that board for 40 years and 30 years, and in those terms. And so quite often we're referring to issues from 40 years ago, and I'm like, well, I wasn't really born. And I'm not on there to, recount and understand the accounts of 40 years ago. But what is interesting, and what I would say is, finding out from those who were on the board, whether it's one-to-one coffees or whatever, what has been the past history, and why they're here, and why they're suddenly recruiting, and so on and so forth, because it does affect the strategy. And so it's difficult to just say, well, I'm here on the board, I'm independent, I'm here to offer all this new thinking, without fully understanding. And some of it is political with a small p that goes on in the running of the board. So I'd just say, maybe it goes back to preparation, but do the homework and find out the history as to what, in order to strategize and go forward with the board.
Bringing due diligence into it as
yes, it is. Because
if you're aspiring into NED roles, you should do due diligence.
Absolutely. And you was talking before about, even before on that board, touching base, coaching for interviews, really important, because people can say, tell you, don't go on that board, this and this, or, do is really interesting, they're very genuinely keen. And often they're things that if you're aspiring, I don't think you really get from headhunters if it's come from that way, or if it's a properly advertised role. I have to say, I often do ring. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to complete application forms and so on and so forth. I want to know, is this really a true advertisement for a NED, or is it a couple of roles, or is it reappointments, as you were talking about before, in respect of NHS roles, sort of the traditional roles? Are they just re-advertising for the sake of it? Because let's face it, to do any of these things properly requires time and prep. And if it's just really, on the balance of probabilities, it's actually just a tick-boxing exercise. I'm not interested. And I don't think aspiring NEDs who are valuable and can be impacted should waste their time either. So it's important to perhaps speak to people you know and trust about, I'm thinking of going for this, what do you think, informally and confidentially.
Perfect.
Just a very quick point on that. It sounds a very obvious point, but if you're a NED on a board, you are by nature non-executive, so you don't you don't have the executive duties. But there's an old-fashioned kind of belief that there shouldn't be a connect with the organisation. So what I would say is, I sit on the board of Manchester Metropolitan University. It is huge as a organisation. You know, you to get the sense of the rhythm of that organisation, you need to be a part of the calendar that's going on. You need to. We've got an incredible first generation programme that I mean, I'm very, very proud that it's in place. But I need to go and see those guys graduating and have chats with you know the talent that's coming through, and understand the challenges that they face and To properly do that, I need to sit on stage at graduations and understand what the purpose of that organisation is and how we're taking people from here to here. You know, you need to sit in a lecture just to get the feel for it. So being non-executive doesn't mean that you just turn up every month for a board meeting. You need to get the rhythm of the organisation and the purpose of the organisation. Otherwise, you know, you've got very little knowledge that you're basing things on.
It's really great advice.
We've got time if I add something to just that point. I think something you said earlier, Sally, about don't take a role unless you really want it and you sort of genuinely have some association with it. I think that's really important. The whole idea of being a NED has changed fundamentally. You know, the old archetypes of I'm chairman of the board or I'm on the board and the status that comes with that. I don't think that exists anymore, particularly for mid-sized businesses where I have the greatest exposure. You are often asked to roll up your sleeves and do real work. You know, you're often asked to spend hours helping to augment a management team that might not have a skill set, and they've brought you in specifically to add that value. And I think that sort of genuine, you know, let's walk the halls, let's get in along the, you know, the shop, factory floor, whatever business it's in. I think it's really good advice. I learnt that while working in the NHS Trust. You don't need to be operational, but you do have a duty of care to get, I think, a feel for the environment. And you will see stuff and you will learn stuff by being out amongst the business. And related to that, but a really important point is you have to be self-confident, or you have to have the confidence to be a good NED. Your duty is not to fellow NEDs and the chair. You're not there to make friends. This isn't a collegiate management team. You're there to serve the interests of the shareholders and uphold statutory laws. So if you don't have the confidence to ask the awkward questions and cause the awkward pauses, then don't be there. And that is a reality of the role. And again, you know, you have directorial responsibilities. If you don't discharge your duties properly, you can get in an awful lot of trouble. You need to have the right insurances to hold these roles. And I think this is not a nice to have. If done well, they're not nice to have.
Sounds like you need to really want to do this and see it as a service.
It's a distinct, different skill set to operational leadership. And you've got to understand that and cultivate the skills in that profession.
But equally, I feel we've gone a bit negative now. Equally, you're all here because you've all got skills that you can add, and it is enjoyable. And I don't want to detract from that. But you're right, it is a serious role. But equally, it is enjoyable. I have a friend, she's in the room, who will not go on a board because she's like, oh, I can do other stuff. Oh, I can do other stuff. And finally, she's like, oh, all right. Now I don't know what board to go on. And sometimes it's that. Sometimes you get over the hurdle of, yeah, actually, I'd quite like to. I do have value add. Where can I? And that's where we go back to those conversations about speaking to those who instruct colleagues and friends to say, you know, Mike, what is university like? It sounds enormous. What do you require? Or, you know, Sarah, actually private equity sounds interesting, but those sort of conversations before stepping in and going, oh gosh, you know, actually insurance or whatever.
Yeah, you've got to want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to innovation then. The challenge of leading innovation is it's really bringing a sea change in governance. We can see this playing out across different industries. Coca-Cola, Nestle, Unilever, they're all struggling with slowing sales in their core businesses. So whereas historically maybe boards might have been very risk averse, senior management is now having to develop new ways of working. So Sarah, I'll come to you first of all. You're leading a research team with the Salford Business School, and you're focused right now on directors and boards of mid-sized business. What role should innovation now play on the board agenda?
I think it's a really good question. And again, I'd step back to say the board and NEDs should have a view on what role innovation is playing in their organisation. So innovation can take many, many forms. It's often mistaken and confused with improvement. But innovation can play several roles. I think people often think it's to do with growth, whether it's diversifying markets, discovering new markets, diversifying product streams. I think the benefits of innovation in the service of growth are reasonably well documented. I think one of the areas that's often overlooked is innovation can be a very powerful cultural driver. I've worked on some fantastic projects around the power of internal thinking and the power of the employee's ability to innovate, often the ones that are most close to the customer. So as a board, I think if you're really clear on what role is innovation playing in our organisation, is it growth? Is it cultural? Are we giving people something to rally behind and be really positive about and be engaged in a channel for their energies and their passions? Or is it to help attract new talent and part of our sort of internal recruitment branding and not only in the service of operational competitiveness? So I think for me it's really do as a board, do we understand the role that innovation is playing and that it's not just a tactical process?
Perfect. I'd like to open that up to the panel.
Yeah, I think the part of the problem with the word innovation, like all buzzwords, is that everybody thinks they have to have it, but they don't really know where they want it or why they need it. So they spend an awful lot of time talking about it, trying to do it, but they might just want to step back a little bit and think very, very carefully. I think it just goes back to what Sarah said about, I imagine for a lot of people, it often the word revolves around tech or technology, or this must be a lifesaver for us. And again, it may not be. It may not be the thing that you want. The idea of innovating how you recruit people, or perhaps how you retain people. Because for those of you that maybe have operations in the southeast, retention of really great people is a blooming difficult thing to do. And thinking of good, innovative ways to help retain those staff might be, again, driving cultural change, might just be the fact, recognising that certainly in our sector, lots and lots of people on minimum wage. And the biggest problem they face is debt. So is there something innovative you can do in order to retain your employees by helping them with these kind of much more sort of philanthropic ideas, but in the modern world, and these really key into millennial and Generation Z individuals who are way more community focused than most of us actually comprehend, much more than people of my generation. They have online communities. They're very used to the idea of sharing. They're very used to the idea of supporting each other. And employers who do that are seen as good people to work for. So I think it isn't just about whether you can get an app. More appropriate, I think, is what can you do to innovate in any area of your business where effectively you're struggling. And I think it is key is to be innovative in your thinking, if that's not like putting too much of a pun on it, but that's what I would say.
Yeah. Mike, our tech man.
I'm listening. I kind of heard what innovation wasn't. I was under. So for me, I think of it as new processes, new services, new ways of doing things, new products, new. Is this how we're kind of banding innovation? Is that?
Well, I think, as I said before, improvement can often be misinterpreted with innovation. Innovation is not just about inventiveness, new products, new services. It can simply be innovative ways of doing what you already do.
New processes.
New processes, new approaches, new pathways, new customer experiences. I think for most organisations, I would always say, define what it means to you. Make sure there's a common alignment across the board around terminology, because in the end, it doesn't really matter whether our views differ on innovation or the terminology. It's that if we're serving on the same board or in the same management team, that we're aligned on our terminology, we're aligned on what it means for our organisation. We have, as a group, decided that innovation means this to us, and we're going to employ these 5 things this year in the service of being innovative. So I think...
Sorry.
Just that alignment piece is key. And often we do trundle along for some time before we realise we're on different pages.
So given that context, the way I look at it is that the role of a board is to take quality decisions. You know, the governance is about creating the conditions that actually enable those quality decisions to be taken. Quality decisions is my kind of passion, which is around strategy. You know, what is it that you are strategically going to do? The way I think that you can best drive innovation in a board and therefore through an organisation is complete focus and actual pain. You know, where you're saying, we're not doing this, and, you know, we are doing this. This is the area we are going to get the improvement. And here is the investment of resource finance that we are prepared to do. And here is the, you know, and therefore you're giving a very clear remit to the executive team to actually make that happen. So, you know, and then you're measuring it and all the rest. So I think it is generally about focus to get innovation. Otherwise, you know, if you want to be a 3M and have 50% of your business as R&D, then that's you know, you can get a very clear kind of innovative approach, but most medium-sized businesses aren't like that. So I think it's choosing where you want to actually innovate and put some pain and accountability behind it.
Okay. So as board members, you're all board members and non-execs, how do you stay ahead of the curve? How do you best equip yourselves to serve the boards that you're on? You know, with digital, it's rapid, it's constantly changing. What kind of things do you do that you could share with the audience today in terms of how they can make sure that they're staying current and of value to the boards that they're on or want to be on? Sally, I'll start with you.
I knew you were going to come. I mean, my day job is being a barrister. I can't get away from that. I practice, and so I'm very much, you know, into knowledge and learning. So I, you know, in respect of my boards, I do read what the current policy is on housing or who the new minister is, for example, because I know that's coming and what that impact will have if we have more units in the arts, where funding is coming from. You know, how will funding be? Should we be investing in capital projects? What sort of not just, you know, because the arts, I was talking before informally, saying I love going to the theatre and so on, but actually it's a business. We need bums on seats and it needs to be full every night. So we need to program, you know, shows that people will want to watch. And that does require innovative thinking, and it does also require the use of technology, for instance. So I read a lot, and I'm very much into seeing the competition. Depending on what board you end up. So on housing boards, they don't use the word competition, they say peers. You know, so these are sort of nuances that one gets used to. So I'm really very focused on knowledge and finding out where are the areas, where are the gaps, where are the new areas, and where is government, sadly, just having a look at what government thinking is and seeing what, for example, the Arts Council is saying about it. But certainly on the technology board that I sit on, but code thing, that's purely profit-driven and being innovative. So, you know, we're working with autonomous cars, AI. We're looking at where responsibility lies in the event of a crash, and I'm leading some of that on the legal issues, corporate manslaughter. So it's the next thing. So on that board, I'm thinking about the next thing. Where is that going? And where are we taking the company in respect of that field? And do we have capacity to expand and grow. And those are board decisions. Yeah, the operational is doing well, huge, high profits for us. But in fact, I like to think about where are we going next, and if we make our business entirely, AI focused and entirely autonomous car focused, where does that leave the rest of our income streams, and where are the dangers and risks? So I tend to look at the next thing. I use knowledge, and I look at risk. Where are the risks? I mean, I'm not. I like risk. I know there's a study show that women are risk averse, and we don't like to take it. But I don't mind. So, as long as well planned and prepared. So that's where I see.
So a futurist approach, knowledge and...
Yeah, actually, just having a look at where are things going. Where can we see? We've got a strategy. What's the 5-year plan? What's the 3-year plan? Yeah, we're now, but looking forward and learning. That's how I look. I read and I look and I take advantage of the IOD membership and so on and so forth. To have any extra gaps in knowledge that I think might be interesting.
Sarah, what's your tips?
One of the interesting early findings from the research we did was that a lot of directors, the majority of directors, sort of 90% above, felt that they were completely and utterly equipped for the role they were playing, the challenges they were facing in their organisation, and through people who are far cleverer than me crafted the questions so we could discover what kind of education they were, or mentoring, or reading, or certifications, things they did to equip and ensure their competency, which was, in most instances, none. So, on one hand, they were incredibly equipped, sort of beyond reproach in their ability to be on the board, but you were not maintaining their own competitiveness, really, and their value and effectiveness in the role. For me, this was an extraordinary finding, and I think we've got to be careful to sort of determine the difference between cause and correlation. I think lots of NEDs, we feel we're entrusted with the role and we're there to provide lots of value, and sometimes at great expense, so you don't want to be seen as the dummy in the room asking the silly questions. So for me personally, that's never been an issue. I'm always the one asking the silly questions in the meeting room. But I do think, I feel really strongly about our need to self-educate and get fresh thinking and stimulus from other quarters. So whether that's personally through reading or being part of professional networks like NedOnBoard, and I have to say NedOnBoard, by comparison to other, for example, the IOD is just irrelevant, outdated, and quite misogynistic, really. In their, I'm quite happy to say that loud and proud. They offer me very little relevance. That's me personally. NedOnBoard is contemporary in their thinking and their policies and their approaches and the types of, I think, generation of NEDs that we're trying to cultivate as having some sense of moral compass, effectiveness, and professionalism around what we do.
And women on boards.
And women on boards.
Sarah's not here, yeah.
But self-educate, read books, be part of a network, talk to people, and at a group level or at a board level, I'd look at enshrining that same sort of injection. I've operated on so many board and management team environments where there just isn't enough business intelligence informing decisions. So it's not just data from within your organisation, but data externally, being competitive analysis or whatever it may be. So I'd codify that and make it systemic in a board agenda that you take on business intelligence regularly.
Mike?
I'd put it down to I'm very passionate about two things. One is international mindset. We market cities in our day job, and I would say, there's UK city leadership that we sat down with who were forever comparing themselves with the place 50 miles down the road, or and I was saying, what about Bilbao? And shouldn't you be looking at Frankfurt? And look at what Malmo's done, or, have a look at the... So I think to get international outlook into a business, you need to, that's the pain thing, you need to work really hard at that. MC2 We're part of an international network. It's not a name thing. People are meeting regularly. So we had 2 directors in Casablanca from Wednesday through Sunday last week. There's guys in Raleigh in a couple of weeks. I've kind of presented over the past year in Berlin, Dallas, Dubai, all around the place to actually get all of these people around the table and go, what are you doing in Poland? How's Slovenia? What's the... Because it could be that actually the maturity of the market is way behind in some areas, but there's certain things that you just think, that's really interesting. And then you go to San Fran and you see all the issues that are around there, but then there are points that you see that you think, that's great. And it's just making sure your board is connected with that international viewpoint, I think is absolutely critical. And the second thing would be data. I would say, do not be blind to data. Embrace it, understand it. Get past this confirmation bias that exists in organizations. We're dealing with it on one board at the moment where we're basing all decisions on what I think is flawed kind of data. And I am being that pain on the board going, no, I'm sorry, I know we need to take this decision now. I'm not prepared to take it on the data that you are presenting at the moment, and that is such a pain for the executive team. But do you know what? And I might be proved wrong, and I hope I am. But at least the challenge will be there, Data has got to show proper insight. It can't be used to confirm an insight that you have already got.
Yeah. Jim.
What's left? I was going to say I was really lucky, and then I thought Sally will say to me, no, you weren't, from her opening remarks.
Don't make your own luck.
But I think I was really lucky because I went to university for the first time about 2 years ago. And wow, that was great, because I'd never been. And the great thing about university is everyone except me is young. And they're just incredibly curious and passionate and just ask the question. Can you give me some more? And I am fortunate because I'm an entrepreneur in residence at a great business school at Lancaster University. It's absolutely fabulous. And so one of the key things for me is that what it affords me, I don't get paid anything for it, but wow, what a package of benefits. I can attend all the masterclasses for free. I can interact with all the students. I can go and meet MBA candidates. I get access to the library, which has as much data as you could ever imagine. And because it's a university, it's global data. I can get to Harvard Business School, download a journal. It's really not a big deal. So access to knowledge, but more importantly, interacting with people who are actually stimulating.
Yeah.
I think that's really key. And certainly from my perspective, I think, every single person who sits on a board should have the personal ability to do something similar themselves. I really don't think it's down to the organisation in the chair to start facilitating all of that. Come and ask. If you need some help to organise it, that's fine. But if you can't do that yourself, then are you really taking your role seriously? Because if you were a founder of that company, you would be doing all that stuff. You know you would, because some of you will have already done it, and you will live and breathe and eat it. And as a non-executive, as Mike said, walking the floor, etc. It's part of that. It is part of that. It is about assimilating knowledge and information that's going to be useful. And we all know that 85% of what we assimilate isn't going to be useful today. But it's having that kernel of a thought that you can refer back to think, gosh, I've seen something around that before. Where will I find that? Who will I be able to phone to? Because I know that Fred deals with that kind of thing, or that David, because he's really cool. David's on every board you can think of. Whatever. So for me, it is about that idea of being passionate about what you're doing, but then taking just the self-discipline. And for me, it's a pleasure. It is an absolute pleasure. If somebody could pay me to do that, I would love it. I would do that every day of the week because I really enjoy meeting new people, learning new things, and then if I can then transfer that somewhere else, well, that's just the cherry on top. Sorry, baking pun.
It's just lifelong learning.